In this week's Power Rankings, we're done playing favorites. Whether your team is low or not, it is what it is. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. It's the Power Rankings and no more BS on top of them. I'll give you a top three that might just blow your mind. In the middle segment, SEC football is kind of bad. And I think I'm done hiding that. I can prove it, too. We aren't in a tough spot, the Big 12, that is, from cannibalizing ourselves, at least compared to the SEC. We'll end it with every Big 12 title scenario left. Stick around for the end of the show where I completely lose my mind trying to explain to you who could play in Arlington next weekend. This show I would like to keep. And if you hit subscribe, I get to keep my job. Without further ado, our Power Rankings. Number 1, Arizona State. That's not shocking for the context currently, but imagine 7 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, a year ago, I tell you Arizona State from 3-9 in the Pac-12 would be ranked at number 1 of the Big 12 Power Rankings going into rivalry weekend, and that Utah would be 15th. So if someone tells you the Big 12 sucks, the Pac-12 was so much better, well, how does perennial Pac-12 champion Utah finish 15th and Arizona State, who is a perennial bottom dweller in the Pac-12, finish at 1 or be right up there at 1? Only because conference affiliation doesn't matter as much as you think it does in the context of realignment and when things move the way they have. Arizona State is at 1. Baylor's at 2. Why is Baylor at 2? They are arguably the hottest team in the Big 12 behind Arizona State. And guess who's at 3? Kansas. Kansas is 5-6, and they're 3rd in the Big 12 Power Rankings. Today, if Iowa State played Kansas, if BYU played Kansas, if Colorado played Kansas, as we have seen, guess who wins those games? Kansas. I'm not playing favorites anymore. I'm not playing, you have the best shot to go to the Big 12 championship and Kansas is outside of that range. Power Rankings? Who's the best team in the Big 12 right now? It's Arizona State. Who's second? I think it's Baylor. The way that they have throttled a couple of teams, then doubled up Houston this week, have a win streak building, and then Kansas at 3, as they've done something the program has never done in one of their most throwaway seasons. In a we're going to struggle to make a bowl game. We're going to be skin of our teeth last game of the year. They are 3rd in the power rankings because they're mowing through ranked opponents. Well, I wish my team was above Kansas. You probably lost to them. Well, my team's West Virginia. We did not lose to Kansas. Okay, do you want me to put Utah above Baylor? I know it happened earlier in the year, but if today Kansas squared off against any of you, not named Arizona State or Baylor, the Jayhawks would win the game. And for that, I have Kansas at 3, Baylor at 2, Arizona State at 1, and there's no more politics. Well, there are a lot of BYU fans, and there are a lot of Colorado fans going to be mad. No, we saw these teams square off head-to-head. Kansas, Colorado, Kansas, BYU. The Jayhawks won. The hottest teams in the Big 12 deserve to be at the top of the power rankings. I don't care where you are in standings. It would be a wash of a show if I sat here and read the standings off to you. These are the power rankings, and it features Iowa State at 4. You're still in it. You know what? I should just rattle it off, shouldn't I? Iowa State at 4, Colorado at 5, BYU at 6, Kansas State at 7. And those teams can all somehow, West Virginia is also in this, Texas Tech's also in this, could all go to Arlington. There could be an 8-way tie. The power rankings, the Big 12 itself, is jumbled up in a mess, and I can explain to you later every Big 12 title scenario, but for now, the power rankings, I'm going to go for Iowa State at 4. Why? Win streak. They've won a couple consecutive. This week, last week was really pretty. This week was ugly. They won at Utah, which is tough for anybody to do. Utah's defense still grades really well. Why is Colorado at 5 and BYU at 6? Well, Colorado got throttled by Kansas, and BYU only lost by, a fluke against Kansas. Fluke's a strong word here. Kansas won the football game in the end. Sorry, BYU fans. I don't know. Switch BYU, switch Colorado. What do you get? Oh, we want to be 5th in the power rankings, or we want to be 6th in the power rankings. BYU is playing at home in a night game where it's impossible for them to lose. Colorado on the road at Arrowhead, and somehow Kansas fans were up for it, despite how porous this season has gone in totality. I'm going to leave Colorado at 5 with their Heisman winning wide receiver / corner and BYU at 6. If you want to switch the two, be my guest. Start a Big 12 podcast. I would gladly have you on. It helps grow the league. 7, Kansas State. Yeah, you're good. You won by a large portion this week. Cincinnati seems dilapidated. They've fallen apart. It's odd to me how many of these Big 12 teams like a BYU or Cincinnati just don't look good anymore. Or Utah, who started so hot, they just don't look good anymore. Weird. Kansas State at 7, 8 TCU. Josh Hoover's good. You won this week against Arizona. Congrats. You're going to a bowl game. You could finish 8-4. Interesting. But you're out of Big 12 title contention. 9, Texas Tech. 10, West Virginia. Is Neil Brown fired? Is he not? I saw a ton of weird GIFs yesterday. It's GIF, GIF, from West Virginia fans. Tech at 9. If we talk about an 8-4 Texas Tech, who they could still go to Arlington, but Mrs. Arlington, was this a success of a season? Are you happy with this season? That's a question I ask Tech fans, and I can't answer it for you. Are you happy with what happened this year? Did you meet the expectation preseason that you had in your mind? A loss to Washington State looms large. Ugly way to start the year. At least you're finishing semi-hot. And then 11 on. Cincinnati. These are the teams that probably aren't going bowling. Cincinnati at 11. There was so much promise, and I was foot in mouth when they played Arizona State and beat Arizona State that maybe Scott Satterfield is the right guy for the job. Maybe we should give him a chance. Maybe Cincinnati's on the up and up. After this, after the last couple of displays that Cincinnati has given you, 11 might be generous. The only reason that they're at 11 is because Arizona is at 12. Arizona at 12, their last few performances, not good. They have not looked like a complete football team, and they're already out of bowl contention for a team that had Noah Fafita and Ted McMillan coming back. That's bad. How are they at 12 and not lower? Because Houston's at 13, and Arizona beat Houston. UCF's at 14. UCF, after going to a bowl last season, bringing enough guys back, having a Kobe Hudson, having a KJ Jefferson, selling out for a quarterback, will miss a bowl game. That's not good. That's not good. They're at 14. Utah is at 15. Another week of disappointment for Utah. Are the Big 12 refs after you? I don't know. Are the Big 12 refs? Do they have a vendetta against Utah? The Utah fans want you to think that. Getting fishy. They called that holding on a field goal thing for the first time in like 36 years. Could it just be a Utah thing where they don't want the Utes to win? Possibly. Maybe we've all conspired again. Maybe I called Brett Yormark and said, make Utah lose. I didn't. 16, Oklahoma State. You had an offense this week. You had an Ollie Gordon this week. Your defense is terrible. Your offense is inconsistent. And your head coach of 20 years is having his worst year ever. You were in the Big 12 title last season and brought everybody back. And then Texas left. The consensus top 5 team in the country left. And yet you are putrid at the whole football thing. That doesn't make a lot of sense in my brain, man. I don't know how you've done it. It's arguably impressive. Those are the power rankings this week. Number 1, Arizona State. Number 2, Baylor. Number 3, Kansas. Why? Because they're the 3 hottest teams in the conference. 4, Iowa State. 5, Colorado. 6, BYU. 7, Kansas State. 8, TCU. 9, Texas Tech. 8. Why did I go back to 8? 10, West Virginia. 11, Cincinnati. 12, Arizona. 13, Houston. 14, UCF. 15, Utah. And 16, Oklahoma State. Coming up, the SEC is, how you say, bad. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is exactly where I go when I want to make some money. I say FanDuel. I think that, I don't know. I've got a hunch. I think Baylor's going to cover the 6.5 that they have against Houston this weekend. So I went to FanDuel and I said, here's 100 of my finest dollars. And FanDuel says, well, when you bet $5 or more and the bet hits, you get $150 in bonus bets for your new customers. And I said, sweet, I would love that. And FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, gave me money back after Baylor covered against Houston. You can do the exact same thing with college football or the NFL all in one place on the FanDuel app. Middle of a game, you get a hunch. Check the latest stats. You live play-by-play. View the trends on the same place that you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more. Do it with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook, and it is an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Visit FanDuel today. The SEC is bad at football. No, don't say that. You're just a Big 12 guy who's ticked off. No, Here's what the almighty SEC has done. This tweet from Rob Donaldson. Listen to this. Number 3, Texas will finish the season with 0 wins over ranked opponents. Riddle me that. Explain that to me, please. It gets worse. It continues. Number 7, Alabama, blown out by unranked Oklahoma, an Oklahoma team that has been porous this year. Bama at 3 losses at 13 in the AP poll may still get into the college football playoff. How? Because even their resume doesn't stack up too much when you look at the fact the SEC has been so porous. That's continued. Number 9, Ole Miss lost to Florida. They're unranked. They're going to fire their coach at some point. Billy Napier's not the answer. He wasn't the answer for Florida fans 3 weeks ago. Florida is not very good at football. Spark with a young quarterback? Sure. Enough to be the number 9 team in the country? No. Fraudulent. How about number 10, Georgia? Struggled with UMass. Do you understand? I get notifications from CBS or ESPN. Close game alert. Turn this game on. When I get an alert that Georgia and UMass, through 3 quarters of football, are still going toe-to-toe, how bad that is for your conference. UMass is putrid at football, has been putrid at football, and your big bad juggernaut, the number 10 team in the country, an SEC staple, Georgia, loses to them. Tennessee, what I don't get about the SEC is, hey, these are the 2 weeks where we're going to play Mercer, Western Kentucky, Louisiana Tech. We're going to throw out a couple of games against, say, UMass, and Tennessee plays UTEP. The same Tennessee that lost to porous Arkansas. Oh, the SEC is cannibalizing itself. There are no dominant teams in the conference. Nobody has risen up in the SEC as this powerhouse world beater. Oh, my goodness, that's the SEC of old. And it's not like it's just they're beating up on each other because they're all so good. No. We saw Arkansas, who lost to Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma State's really, really bad, by the way, beat Tennessee. And I say this all the time. I'll say it again. It's the number 1 point to be made here. Transitive property doesn't work. Just because you beat somebody doesn't mean you beat somebody. But this conference has teams like number 15 Texas A&M losing to Auburn. The Big 12 is not alone in parity. It's not alone in cannibalization. The only reason I'm not bringing the Big 10 up in this is because you ask the Sagarin ratings. The SEC is the number 1 conference in football. Big 12 is number 2. Why? Because a vast majority of the Big 10 is not only, listen to this, is not only irrelevant, but also incompetent on a football field. That's what you bring to the water cooler. Well, maybe the Big 10 is just the best conference. No. Outside of like 4 teams, everyone else is not only bad. They're not only bad, like non-competitive. They don't have a brand to stick out in college football. No one is registering Maryland. So the only thing Maryland could do, no one's registering right now Northwestern. The only thing Northwestern could do or Purdue could do is beat a team at the top of the conference, and they're not doing that. Whereas in the Big 12, that's what's happening. Whereas in the SEC, that's what's happening. Maybe the SEC is just a bunch of good college football teams, and they're overrated on the whole. Maybe the SEC is a bunch of competent college football teams that are a whole lot more even than we give them credit for. Riddle me this. Let's pick a top-of-the-line Big 12 team like Colorado, 8-3 Colorado. Let me ask you this. Let me go through a schedule here, a mock schedule, and see if you think they'd win, how many games they'd win. They'd play Colorado State. They already beat them, so obviously they'd win that. Michigan. That's a win. Michigan stinks because I can't win a game stinks. UTSA. Okay, give me something hard. UL Monroe. That's a win, too. How about Colorado against Mississippi State? They blow the doors off of them. Colorado against Oklahoma. That's going to be a Colorado win. Colorado against Georgia. You know what? Fine. I'll reason with you during this silly game. Colorado loses to Georgia. How about Colorado and Vanderbilt? No, yeah, horses are in the stable. Colorado does beat Vanderbilt. Florida? Sorry. Arkansas, Kentucky, maybe. No, Colorado's favored in all of those games. For sure. Yeah, that's Texas's schedule. That's just the Texas schedule. Same Texas that beat Vanderbilt 27-24, baby. Yeah, struggled with Arkansas. Yeah. Colorado takes that schedule, the SEC schedule. BYU takes that schedule. Iowa State takes that schedule, and they run it. We don't get breaks in the Big 12 anymore. There's not like, we're playing Cincinnati this week, we can slack off. No. They've got a first-round draft pick on defense. That's a legitimate Cincinnati team any given week. Any given week. Some weeks they suck, yeah. But any given week, they show up and become a formidable opponent, and then you have to go out and do it again next week against Iowa State, and then again the next week against Kansas State, and again the next week against a top 10 defense in Utah. Do they have the wins? No. They have the analytics. They have the metrics that show they're a very good football team. The SEC. Rob Donaldson continues, and I like this. It's time for people with horribly outdated opinions to reflect on the modern day SEC. The conference's optics would only be worse if they actually played a 9-game conference schedule like every other power conference. The hypothetical champions of the universe, the SEC. They play 8 games in conference so they can add more Mercers, more Abilene Christians. And I get it. We play those at the beginning of the season, but then we wake up in week 11 and Alabama is taking on mighty South Alabama. Further on the Texas schedule, this from Gamecock Kyle. Who can you name, just a couple of teams off the top of your head, who have played at least 2 SEC teams with a record above 500 in conference play? A team that's played, all you have to do is play 2 SEC teams, just 2, that have a winning record in conference play. Because Texas hasn't. UMass has. UMass has played 2 SEC teams with a winning record in the Southeastern Conference. Texas does not fit in that category. Do you understand how bad of a mark that is on that conference that decides to play no one? The Big 12. This is great too. Stuart Mandel. 3 top 15 SEC teams went on the road Saturday. 1 loss to a 5-5 team. 1 loss to a 5-5 team. 1 loss to a 4-6 team. But this is the big, mighty, bad boys of college football. Fear me. No. No, I'm going to go in the comments. I disagree with this guy. Sweet. I didn't give you my opinion, really. Like, maybe it's subjective, but I just kind of read like scores and statements. Possibly a bit of it's opinionated, but I just gave you a really good rundown, whether you wanted to listen to it or not, because the SEC fans have their earmuffs on. Don't tell me my conference isn't great. I just gave it to you. So the Big 12 is only going to get 1 college football playoff team in because it's down there. It's the Big 12. The SEC keeps losing to teams that suck. And it's not like Kansas isn't getting blown out one week and then beating somebody the next. They are on a hot streak and just mowing through people. Auburn is getting blown out by people and then winning games like they won against Texas A&M this week. Makes no sense. Coming up, every Big 12 title scenario left. There are 256 of them on Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the best because there is a concert festival coming up in Whitefish, Montana called Under the Sky. And I want cheap tickets, so I said, boop, 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 Game Time, can I get those? And they said, yeah. We have the lowest price guaranteed, or 110% of the difference will be credited to you. And with Game Time ticket coverage, though that festival to see Tyler Childers in Montana is in July, they say your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege, $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Take yourself to join me under the big sky in Montana, seeing Tyler Childers thanks to cheap tickets from Game Time. What time is it? Game Time. Visit Game Time. Do it today. Big 12 championship scenarios. I can't give them all to you. There are 256. But I do know from BYU to Colorado to even Baylor, I can give you the scenarios that will get these teams in. It's not easy. It's very complicated. Bear with me. If your favorite team is in that 8, I'm going to bring them up here and tell you how they can get in. Greg Wrubel, who is the voice of the BYU Cougars, tweets, BYU's path to the Big 12 title game is a win against Houston and a Kansas State win at Iowa State or an Arizona win against Arizona State. So the goal for BYU, if you're a BYU fan, you win your game this week, you take care of business. And in the 2 games prior, in those time slots prior, you're a massive K-State fan. You're a massive Arizona fan. Change your Twitter bio picture now, or your what is it called, profile picture now, to one of those 2 teams. That's who you're rooting for alongside the Cougars this week. I had to go to Reddit to get the rest of the playoff scenarios. Colorado, according to Reddit, clinches a Big 12 title game berth with a win plus Iowa State loss plus Arizona State loss. So if you're Colorado, you're also rooting for Iowa State to lose to Kansas State this week, for Arizona State to lose to Arizona. In a scenario where Colorado wins and BYU wins, Iowa State loses, and Arizona State loses, say hello. We have a Big 12 championship between Colorado and BYU as we were promised 3 weeks ago. That would be awesome. Or Colorado could get in with a win and an Iowa State loss and a BYU loss to Houston. That would mean that we're down to 2 7-2 teams, Colorado and Arizona State. Or Colorado gets in if they win. In all these scenarios, these teams are going to need to win. Plus an Arizona State loss, plus a BYU loss. So if you're a Colorado fan, you change your profile picture, rooting this week for Kansas State and rooting for Arizona, and even rooting for Houston. If all 3 of those teams lose, hey, all good. You're in. Win your game, take care of your business. Hope the other teams that are at that 2-loss category fold. Arizona State clinches a Big 12 title game with a win, plus an Iowa State loss, plus a BYU loss. You could also clinch with a win and a BYU loss and a Colorado loss. Arizona State's is kind of convoluted. You're gonna be rooting hard for Kansas State. You're rooting hard for Houston. You're gonna want BYU to lose, and you hold the head-to-head against BYU, so that's gonna put you in a good spot. But the problem could be is what if we somehow, some way, get tied in here for another team that BYU has beaten, and now we sit at there are some question marks for Arizona State. You still don't control your own destiny, even with a win. Already mentioned that BYU. Let's go here. Iowa State. You need to win. You need Arizona State and BYU to lose. That is one scenario in which Iowa State gets in. So we're big fans this week of Arizona, and we're big fans of Houston if you're an Iowa State fan. Iowa State. You could win your game. Arizona beats Arizona State, and Colorado loses this week. In that scenario, you would get in. So you're rooting for a Colorado loss, and simultaneously, you're trying to get that Arizona State loss here. A lot of teams are counting on Arizona State to lose. So just take care of business and then hope that Oklahoma State pulls a miracle against Colorado. That's on the table. Last chance for Iowa State is with a win and a BYU loss and a Colorado loss. Will BYU lose to Houston on the same week Colorado loses to Oklahoma State? Honestly, yeah, it's possible. Like crazier stuff's happening in the Big 12. I'm not going to say never. Kansas State. You could go to the Big 12 title. Win. BYU loss, Arizona State loss, Baylor loss. You're in. That's all it would take. BYU loses to Houston. Arizona State loses to Arizona. Unlikely. Baylor loses this week. And in that realm, Baylor loses to Kansas. In that realm, you're in. Or BYU loses, Colorado loses, and Baylor loses. Those 3 occur. Congrats, Kansas State, I should say. You're in. I put your hats on. You're rooting for Kansas this week hard. You need a Baylor loss. You're rooting for Oklahoma State hard. I'd say the most likely of those is BYU losing to Houston, Arizona State losing to Arizona, and Baylor losing to Kansas. K-State's rooting for Kansas very hard this week, as well as the Cougars of Houston and the Wildcats of Arizona. Texas Tech. Tech with a win, plus a BYU loss, plus an Iowa State loss, plus a Colorado loss, plus an Arizona State loss. All of the 2-loss teams in this conference fall this weekend, and Texas Tech wins, and you're not just maybe in, you have clinched a Big 12 championship berth. I don't know how that we got here, but you're in. The 2-loss teams lose, and they all fall to 3-loss squads. Texas Tech is in. Baylor also somehow here. If you win, okay? If you win, you can go to the Big 12 championship game. You beat Kansas. BYU loses to Houston. Iowa State loses to Kansas State. Arizona State, they lose their game to Arizona. And according to Reddit, Baylor clinches a Big 12 title game berth. No matter what, the Bears can say we were alive on rivalry weekend with a chance to go to the Big 12 championship game. Somehow, Baylor could also get in with a win, a Colorado loss to Oklahoma State, very unlikely, an Iowa State loss, and an Arizona State loss. At that point, there's a good chance we get BYU and Baylor. A lot of God in that one, playing in Arlington. I'm not done. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, Fire Neil Brown is in the Big 12 championship game with a win, a Baylor loss, a BYU loss, a Colorado loss, and an Arizona State loss. At which point, it's likely West Virginia, Iowa State. I don't know how any of this makes sense. And if I had to break down the tiebreaker, I don't even know how I would start. But this is the world that we live in. This is the Big 12 world that we live in. Arizona State, you're close, but you don't control your own destiny. BYU, you're still close, but you don't control your own destiny. And there are so many ways in which like a Baylor wins or even a BYU wins, and they still don't get in. That is the chaos. That is the madness. That is the absolute wild scenario the Big 12 has gotten itself in. It's like everybody else in the country got to figure it out. The SEC, they kind of know. It's going to be Georgia and somebody, SMU and somebody in the ACC, Ohio State and Oregon are likely going to face off in the Big 10. The Big 12, grab a beer and then try to do the math. I'm going to go take a hot bath. I don't even know. I get that. My brain's gone. That broke my brain. Loss, win. With a win, you get in and they get in. And this is not, I did not take math in college. This has been, it always will be. Come back tomorrow for more football talk, I think, is what we'll be doing. Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.